Welcome back to Kleppers Corner, Today in History, the only show where we observe the winter solstice by squinting at humanity's darkest moments and going, yep, that checks out. Today is December 21st, the shortest day of the year, which historically means people either built giant stone calendars, invented basketball, or accidentally launched themselves into geopolitical chaos. Truly, a buffet of human decision-making. Let's dive into the greatest hits of this very chilly day in human history. Segment 1, Solstice, Yule, and the Great Ancient Freakout. Humans have always looked at the solstice and panicked like someone unplugged the sun. At Newgrange, they built a giant stone tube that lights up once a year. That's dedication. I can barely get my toaster to work twice in a row. And the Yule log? A whole tree shoved into a house and lit on fire. I love the confidence. Nothing says we fear darkness like an indoor bonfire and hoping the insurance adjuster is also pagan. And St. Thomas's Day? A medieval door-to-door fundraiser, except instead of selling cookies, people were just trying to not freeze to death. Honestly, the most relatable tradition of the bunch. Segment 2, Rome finally gets its act together. Vespasian confirmed. In 69 AD, Rome had 4 emperors in 1 year, which is the political version of speed dating where everyone dies. On December 21st, the Senate confirmed Vespasian, who wasn't even in Rome. He was in Egypt, controlling the grain supply like a guy who says, "You'll love my policy platform. It's mostly carbs." His rule restored stability, built the Colosseum, and taxed urine. Imagine Congress trying that today. Actually, don't. They'd find a way to make it partisan. Segment 3, Linuesa, when winning still feels like losing. Castile beats Granada in 1361 and rescues captives, but then the king demands all the loot and promises to pay people back. This is medieval HR. Nothing like winning a battle only to discover your boss has the Venmo habits of that friend who always says, "I'll get you next time," and never, ever does. The seeds of civil war planted right there in the group chat. Segment 4, the pilgrims, the calendar, and math they couldn't do. December 21st marks the day the Mayflower passengers decided Plymouth looked like a great place to start a colony. Mostly because the previous occupants had been wiped out by disease and left some very convenient farmland. But thanks to calendar confusion, Americans have celebrated on December 22nd for centuries. Nothing says future superpower like messing up a date conversion. Our ancestors invented Thanksgiving, but they also invented forgetting to carry the 1. Segment 5, Lincoln invents the Medal of Honor and Sherman gifts Savannah. In 1861, Lincoln signs the Medal of Honor into existence, proving that even in the darkest times, people need recognition for bravery. Also, it's cheaper than raises. And 3 years later, Sherman finishes his march to the sea and hands Savannah to Lincoln like a very aggressive Christmas present. Dear Mr. President, here's a city. Enjoy the cotton. Nothing says festive like total war with a bow on it. Segment 6, Konya, Rochdale, and Curies with radioactive enthusiasm. The Battle of Konya in 1832 was basically Ottomans versus fog. Egypt's forces heard the Ottomans before they saw them, which is not how you want any fight to begin. Then, in 1844, the Rochdale pioneers reject predatory economics by opening a small store that accidentally starts a global movement. And in 1898, the Curies discover radium in what might be the least safe lab of all time. The notebooks are still radioactive. Imagine writing something so spicy it stays dangerous for a century. Segment 7, dollhouses, peach baskets, word puzzles, and Soviet cinema. Henrik Ibsen premieres A Doll's House in 1879, and audiences lose their minds because a woman leaves a man. Meanwhile, in 1891, Naismith invents basketball because his students were too rowdy. Truly, the greatest indoor recess solution ever made. Then, in 1913, the first crossword puzzle appears, launching a century of people pretending they're not peeking at the answers. And in 1925, battleship Potemkin debuts, pioneering montage and terrifying every future film student who now must write a paper on the Odessa Steppe sequence. Segment 8. Sovereignty, space, treaties, and a tragedy remembered. Nepal secures formal international sovereignty in 1923, which is the diplomatic version of finally getting your landlord to admit the lease is legally binding. Patton dies in 1945, reshaping the post-war chessboard. Apollo 8 launches in 1968, and humanity officially becomes spacefaring. In 1979, the Lancaster House Agreement ends a long conflict and sets the stage for Zimbabwe's independence. And on this day in 1988, a tragedy over Scotland reshapes global aviation security forever. A solemn reminder that history on the solstice carries both light and shadow. And finally, ICERD is adopted in 1965, giving the world a legal tool for demanding equal dignity. Something we're still working on, but hey, at least we wrote it down. Segment 9, Fitzgerald, Stalin's birthday shuffle, and the historical glow-up. December 21st also brings us the world's strangest comparison. F. Scott Fitzgerald and Joseph Stalin sharing a calendar slot. Fitzgerald dies in 1940 thinking he was a flop, which feels absurd when half the country now decorates their dorm rooms with Gatsby quotes they don't understand. Meanwhile, Stalin decided his birthday was December 21st because nothing says dictator energy like editing your own origin story. Imagine being so committed to the bit, you rewrite the calendar. The solstice is supposed to give us a little more daylight, but historically, December 21st seems to specialize in people discovering that fame is weird, memory is flexible, and legacy is basically the world's longest group project where no one agrees on the final grade. In conclusion, December 21st is where human history gathers all its chaos, brilliance, confusion, invention, rebellion, and please don't light that inside the house energy into one very short day. From ancient solstice rituals to emperors born out of grain quotas, from radium glowing a little too enthusiastically to astronauts catching Earthrise on Christmas Eve, the date shows us how people keep trying to push light into the darkness. Sometimes literally, sometimes metaphorically, sometimes with peach baskets. As the sun begins its slow return, remember, history isn't just what happened. It's what we celebrate, what we misremember, and what we keep dragging into the future in hopes it makes a little more sense next time the days get short.